All right, we are joined by the BFL Featherweight Champion, Mateo Vogel, who just recently defended his title against Taylor Christopher at BFL 74 in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Congratulations on a very impressive fight and victory, Mateo.
Hey, thank you very much, man.
You know, it's funny. I was thinking about it. I'm like, I don't think I've seen like it seems like all of your fights are dynamic, action-packed, and entertaining. None of them are boring. None of your fights are boring. You're always bringing the action, and particularly in this fight, of course. And we're going to get into it. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, would it be fair to make this statement? You're probably one of the most entertaining fighters out there, just based on that criteria, as far as Canadian MMA fighters currently active at this moment. That's always, you know what I mean? Each fight is always entertaining, dynamic, dramatic, use whatever keywords you want to use. They're always worth watching. So thank you very much for always putting on entertaining fights, including your last fight for BFL against Nick Wallet, which was, quite frankly, man, it was epic. And I
That was
hope
a bit of a war, huh?
pardon me?
That one was a bit of a war, huh? Back and forth with Nick Willett.
It was incredible, man. It was, I think it was any promoter's dream as far as what that sort of buzz created for the brand, but also showcasing, the tremendous talent that we have in this country. Mateo, first question I want to ask you, and we'll just jump right into it. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but this was your first title defense. Did you feel more pressure to perform and demonstrate your overall best?
Maybe at first, but once I was about to hop into the cage, like you remember, it's essentially it's like any other fight. So maybe leading up to it, yeah, I felt more pressure because of the context I thought about it in. I thought about it as my first title defense, and then like there's an expectation at that point. But the closer I got to the fight, the more I just kind of treated it like any other fight. The more I just thought about it like any other day, any other competition. And uh, come fight day, I gained a whole new different level of comfort in the actual fight. So to answer your question, funny enough, like weeks out, yeah, I felt pressure. Fight day, no.
Very
Fight day, I was
interesting.
calm, cool, and collected.
Was that, may I follow up to that? Did something particularly happen on fight day, or is this just your regular trajectory of emotions on fight day? You're cool and collected, as you mentioned, but
Well, it came honestly from talking to my coaches and just kind of Peter and I were just kind of reflecting about my career so far. We were just kind of reflecting about my past and like that when I've done the best, even recently, when I've done the best was in to cite like say jiu-jitsu tournaments, for instance. When I did the best was when I found my familiarity in there, when I found the calmness in there, when I approached the fights a certain or the tournaments, whatever they may be, a certain way, I was able to be more myself. So that's kind of how I came out into this fight. I came in with a bit more of a familiar kind of feeling to where, there's an ability to enjoy the moment. When you enjoy the moment, you can truly be yourself. A lot of guys have a hard time being as good as they are in the gym in a fight. And that's because of maybe a lack of familiarity, but like when they add that new meaning to it, right? So you are doing the same thing that you do all the time, but then you add meaning. So when I kind of reflected and like looked at the mindset I've had in my best matches or best performances, I was able to replicate that in MMA.
Very, very interesting statement, and I want to get into this topic of your mindset, because clearly it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're evolving as a fighter, but you're also evolving in terms of your outlook of fighting and training, and we're going to explore that. But before we do, obviously, for those who haven't seen the fight, I highly recommend you check it out on UFC Fight Pass. That's BFL 74. You were in the co-main event, excuse me, against
Sorry.
Taylor Christopher. Do us a favor, break down the fight for us as you recall it, And tell us also what your initial plan was going into the fight.
Okay, so going in there had been dialogue ahead of time. Okay, so first of all, BFL is pretty on it with like the interviews leading up to it. You do like a couple interviews leading up to the fight, and you kind of, they ask us a few questions, and like when it comes to I don't know, it could be around game plan or what we think of the other guy or whatever it is. So then you kind of get to hear what the other guy thinks of you, and you get to hear kind of what the other guy's mindset towards you is. So it's like Taylor Christopher's dialogue seemed to be, he was talking about wrestling, right? He's probably assuming that I'm going to wrestle him, or maybe that meant he was going to wrestle me. I was kind of ready for either of those, but you got to remember, a lot of the time what people put out there, they don't always have the intention of doing that in the fight. You know what I mean? That's happened in the past too. So he kind of talked about wrestling going forward. So honestly, I feel really great about my wrestling against anybody, but going in there, I kind of had the mindset that he was going to try and rush me, which he didn't. He did the opposite, actually. So like when we actually were in the fight, Taylor Christopher and me took a good couple minutes to actually start swinging at each other, or a good minute or so to kind of feel each other out, right? And it was at that moment I noticed he wasn't going to rush me. He was actually kind of playing it cool. I was the first one to do something. I threw some leg kicks, which missed, but I guess at that point he started feeling more comfortable. He started maybe committing a little more, trying to land some shots on me. He tried to land heavy shots on me, and when he did, I started landing the leg kicks. Right, so he'd come in, he'd step heavy, trying to punch me, and then I started kind of just bit by bit chipping away at his legs. And it happened once in the first round that he got me with one good shot. Right, I was able to keep my hands up and actually step out of the way of a few, but I was able to keep my hands up, and most of those shots were landing on like my forearms and on my shoulders. Right? So come round two, Jeff and Peter are like, okay, it's good, but we need to get some grappling going. They wanted to get a little bit of grappling going at least. They didn't tell me to stop doing what I was doing, but I attempted to kind of feel him out a little bit with the wrestling still. I just wanted to feel his takedown defense, which he was good. He played like a deep whizzer when I shot in on one of those double legs, right? But again, like same thing, right from the get-go, the leg kicks were landing, the leg kicks were working, and he wasn't checking them, right? So I kept chipping the leg, chipping the calf, and then I started picking up the power a little bit. After his feet stopped moving a little bit from those kicks, I started bringing it up to the body as well. And the second round was more decisively mine. If you were to watch that fight, right? The first one was a little more back and forth. I would kick him, occasionally landing left hooks. Second one, I started picking it up a little bit. I started finding my distance, and I landed a bunch of left hands on him too. Right? He stuffed the two takedowns I did, and then the kick started climbing up to the head as well. I think I landed one head kick in two as well. Right? So the plan was to chip away at the base, then start attacking the body, and when it presented itself, I was going to kick the head.
It was the kicking was really interesting because I don't, unfortunately I don't have the stats on the strikes and whatnot. It's I don't think they provided that, but I noticed that there was a higher volume of striking, particularly the kicking coming from you. It was really visible, and it was I'm seeing progression as a fighter and as a competitor, but also you had this aggression with the kicking, and you seemed very comfortable in there overall with the striking. Obviously you're training at New York Combat Sports with Crew Jeff and the gang, they're great strikers over there, of course, but I'm seeing, I guess what I'm saying is in this match we were beginning to see it was predominantly striking, right? Round one, round two was predominantly striking, and for you the kicking was you certainly put on a clinic with those kicks, as you mentioned, to the leg, to the body, and to the head. And the commentators were commenting, were putting in a focus on that as well. But it's interesting too, because in round one, when he did hit you with that left hook, I believe it was 30 seconds. There was 30 seconds left in the match, and he managed to connect with a very strong left hook. Initially, when I watched it, it looked, it looked bad. Obviously, it was a very good hit, but it seemed like you recovered quickly, as you mentioned, because when he came in, you recovered quickly, and you were pretty composed and calm. In fact, you were even moving forward after that, and it was, there was a lot of confidence there. And it's funny because when you watch a match once, initially when you're watching it live, you have your initial reaction, but when you watch it 2, 3, 4 times, you begin to see the whole picture. You know what I'm saying? And you begin to pick up. And it's for round one. Initially, I was like, yeah, definitely round one, Christopher dominated. But after watching it, as I mentioned, upwards 3, 4 times, I don't know if he did. Of course he landed some good strikes, but you did as well. It was a good back and forth. If anything,
the thing is,
sure.
if you count those kicks, if you count how many times, and it's not just how many times I kicked him, it's also how hard I kicked him that many times. It's not like I was just pity patting his leg.
Right.
If you can ask anybody who's been kicked by me, I can fucking kick like a horse. So I was chipping away at him, but I was landing those kicks. I was getting him in the quads. He wasn't checking them. I was kicking him in the calf and in the quad repeatedly. If you count that versus maybe 2 significant punches, I think I win the round every single time.
Yeah, I mean, as I would have to agree with that, because I went back and I watched it, and it appeared overall that there was, sure, he connected with that, but as you just mentioned with the kicks in round number one, and as far as round number two, you took away that round, absolutely. And it's interesting too, because 40 seconds left into round number two, I think he also connected with a left hook again, but you retaliated, and you just finished really, really strong. In fact, in the corner, I think your coach, Crew Jeff Harrison, he mentioned some interesting keywords. He said patient, poised, precise, and power, like the 4 P's. Can you elaborate? What did he mean by that? Speak to us on that.
Well, Crew Jeff and I have, between each other, we have developed our own little language in terms of, we like to use phrases with 3 words, for instance, or he'll create something like a concept, right?
Right.
We've got like the 3 F's, and in this case it was the 3 P's, and then he added a P on the end. He made it 4 P's. But I think he just knows that it resonates with me. It's something that it's like the 3-point form. It's something that my dad used to do with me when I was a kid playing sports too. My dad used to do this with me for hockey and for soccer and for whatever he put me in. He would give me. I was a very ADHD kid, right? So he would give me 3 points, and when you take a kid like that, I'm sorry, I'm using my dad as an example first. When you take a kid like that and give them 3 things to focus on, 3 very distinct, obvious things that you choose keywords for, you can actually get hyper focus out of that. And I think Jeff knows that about me too. So he said, what was it? It was patience, poise, and precision. Was it?
Yeah.
Right?
Patient,
So,
poise, precise. Yeah. Precision.
poise,
Yeah.
and precise was the key things. He knows, again, my coaches and I are really close. Like, they know what I need to do for success, much like they know what Alex needs to do for success, and so forth.
Right.
In my case, my downfall has been the lack of those things. If you watch some of my earlier fights, when I become too much of a hothead, when I chase things too much, you know what I mean? So when I am truly being patient, poised, and precise, these guys watch me in the gym, and they know exactly when I can kind of flourish. You know what I mean? Like when I have my best performances is when I'm patient, I'm poised, and I'm precise. When my mindset is focusing on specific things, and I'm not in a rush, and I'm not in there just to get into a firefight. When I do those things, when I stay patient, poised, and precise, I am honestly is when I feel unstoppable. whether it's a
Yeah,
sparring, whether it's a tournament match, whether it's an MMA fight, you know?
absolutely. And it's interesting because after that, you go into round number three, and you manage to finish your opponent just in 1 minute into round number three. Can you set up that entire sequence there, how you finished your opponent?
Well, I noticed if you watch some of the second round first, you'll notice Taylor Christopher, each time I go for a higher kick or a head kick, he was able to stop a few of them. Now, some of them he was able to duck under. A few others he was able to stop by dropping his hands. So he would drop his hands and essentially brush my kick with both hands. I
Mhm.
picked up on this. So I noticed a trend. When he did this, I knew what I had to do with the head kick, and I changed the timing on the head kick just very slightly, as well as the angle. So when I did those two things, it kind of came over the top. It chopped the top of his head, which is what actually stunned him, in my opinion, was the kick. I noticed after I started throwing a few of those head kicks as well, he would retaliate with a big right or a left hand. He'd throw a big hook afterwards. So I started throwing the back fist to keep him away. So by the time round three came,
I'm still here.
oh, you're still there?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, please go ahead.
By the time round three came away, I changed the angle of that kick. I changed the timing of that kick, and I followed it up with the back fist because I knew he was following, right? When I landed the back fist is when I was actually able to stun him. That's when he was rocked, right?
Mhm.
Everyone thinks it was the takedown that did it, and everyone keeps asking me about that. But from my side, I hit Taylor, and that's when he was out on his feet, bro. The takedown was more of a, maybe I've drilled takedowns more, yeah, but when he was rocked, my immediate instinct is I wanted to sit him on his butt so I could finish him. I didn't
And
want
and
him to run away and recover, right? I wanted to put him on his ass so I could finish him.
and I mean, you did just that. Of course, it was quite a brutal finish, a very decisive way to defend your title. And it was, I must say, it was hella entertaining for fans like us to see that sort of finish. So congratulations to you. And I wanted to know, just going back to the three Ps. It seems, it seems that you're continuously improving as a fighter. Like, if you
Thank you so
go,
much.
yeah, man, I'm for real. Like I've watched all your fights are available. People can watch them, and you could see that progression. Each fight you're getting better, one way or another. It appears that way. Obviously, you're winning. Oh, I think I'm frozen. You're winning, and you're performing. And we're seeing that improvement. In your opinion, oh, I'm still not back on. Sorry.
On there.
Okay. Zoom is not operating with me today, but I'll keep talking anyways. So you're continuously improving, and I wanted to know, in terms of, in your opinion, how would you say what aspect of your game has improved the most? And a follow-up to that is, particularly since your last fight with Nick Ouellet in April, what have you been focusing on?
Well, since my last fight with Nick Ouellet, it was like it hasn't been large things I'm focusing on now. Now that like I started MMA kind of later, so we did like the big things early on. I focused on the big things, the striking, the the MMA itself, what have you. But now I'm at a point where I'm focusing on small things that are this important, right? So, um, one big change was again like a mental one. It was the mindset. It's the it's kind of the maturity that I approach it with more so than anything. So, like I told you at the beginning, the mindset that I'm now approaching my fights with is one of poise, precision, and some patience. So that would be one of the biggest things that I'm improving upon is actually the mental side of it. My physicality in terms of that, like I've always been pretty good at working. I've always been a very athletic guy, and I'm pretty good about always staying in shape. Right, I'm never really out of shape in a fight. So the physical side of things is one thing. I wouldn't say that I've made massive gains in that in the past little bit, but with the mental I have, and I think the Nick Ouellet fight maybe was confirmation that when I'm in the right frame of mind is when I'm truly unstoppable. So if there's anything we've improved upon, I'd say it's that, the mental side.
Very interesting, because we noticed that obviously in your corner for this fight, you had your grappling coach, Peter Fasikas, your striking and MMA coach, Jeff Harrison, Jeff Harrison, cornering you as always. But in addition to that, you also had your mental performance coach, Dylan Nadler.
I did.
Yeah, and what was that like, having an additional coach there for you? How did that change the experience, I guess?
Well, for me, I have the advantage of, so yes, Dylan runs Mindlock, and he's an awesome mental coach. He knows a lot. He knows about psychology. He knows about these things, but he's also to some degree being in my shoes in that sense, right? So this guy doesn't just coach people. He's not just some guy who studied and then started to coach people.
Right.
He kind of draws from his own experience. He was a Team Canada, a national level competitor in Taekwondo his entire life, right? Since he was a kid. So he's actually had high level competition experience since he was a child up until recently, right? So he's been in my shoes. He's competed at a high level, and he draws upon that experience in addition to having an understanding of psychology. The other bonus is that Dylan is also my teammate too. He's not just my mental coach. The guy has trained with me in the gym, right? So him and I do have that relationship like that. So to have Dylan there with my coaches, it's a pretty familiar kind of vibe, because he's one of the team. And one thing I really like on fight week in particular is to be surrounded by the team, surrounded by my brothers, surrounded by the guys we come up with, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So to have Dylan there for fight week was more of like, it was more so that even than just having him in my corner, because you know, in the corner, that's just 1 minute at a time between rounds. Where Dylan and I really did our best work was during fight week, by just, you know, conversing, by having him in my hotel room with me on fight day, by having him in the gym with me when I'm warming up. Him and I we would just follow up and we would do our exercises together, right? And Dylan kind of just helped reframe my mindset leading up to the fight.
You know, it's interesting, Mateo, because I could even tell from just our interview here today that you seem like I'm not trying to go off on a tangent, but you seem like a different person. You seem, you know what I mean? I've interviewed you before, but you seem very calm. You're really expanding on concepts, and it's interesting, you know, to see that sort of maturity of you know, in a fighter. And I'm not saying you were immature before. I'm just saying, you know what I mean? Like it's yeah, I could see that development on many levels. Follow-up question: in terms of you made a really interesting post in your post-fight interview with David Perron. You stated that you needed to be tested in order to get to that next level. And I'm just curious to know, I think all of us who heard it knew what you meant, but elaborate and give us some details and some context as to why you made this statement.
Well, coaches and I were talking, and like we kind of agree on this. Well, we do agree on this, which is, you know, I want to take my career to the next level. I don't want to just go to the UFC. My goal is not to go to the UFC. My goal is to stay there. I want to be there and be one of the guys that you're watching on Embedded. I want to be one of the guys one of the ranked guys, one of the top guys in the UFC. And if I can chase that to the point where I can become a champion, this is what my vision is. So you're not going to get there if you're always fighting guys who are 2-0. You know what I mean? The guys
Right.
just, now I fought guys with more experience than that. I fought Damon Blackshear. I fought Garrett. I fought Xavier. I fought high level guys with a ton of fights before.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Two of my last opponents just fought in the UFC. You know what I mean? One of whom I finished. So if you look at the past two fights, it's been both guys 2-0. I'm not taking anything away from them skill wise or
anything like that. Ouellet is a super high level guy. You know, Taylor Christopher, he's high level as well. But if you look at the experience, if I'm gonna fight at that next level, I need to prove I belong there. So
Right.
I need to go against someone who's done it. And if I can fight a UFC vet, or if I can fight somebody with more than 10 fights, I feel that that's the way I'm going to solidify that and really show that I belong. I'm not just crushing tough guys. I'm crushing the best of the best I can get.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
we want to
no,
prove that we can smash everybody.
absolutely. No, it makes total sense. I see where you're coming from, and I appreciate that you provided that context for us. If I can ask this question, because I've read some comments in regards to this, would you entertain the possibility of a rematch against a Nick Ouellet?
Maybe going forward, but I want somebody else first. I'm not saying I'm not taking away that possibility, but again, like, he lost to me and then he didn't fight anybody.
Right.
Right. And they're all commenting, oh, rematch. It's like, we'll win first. Beat somebody and then call me out.
Right.
You know what
All
I mean?
right. Who currently right now, I guess, who would you like? Is there someone in particular that you're looking at possibly booking a fight with? Has there been any discussions in regards to your next fight, I guess?
Well, we've been having conversations, we've been talking. I don't have my eyes set on anyone in particular right now, no. But I know that there's guys like that out there. There's guys like that who had just been in the UFC. There's guys both at 35 and at 45, right? Obviously, 45 is my home right now. I'm a little bit big for 35. But yeah, man, I just want somebody who is either my experience or higher. That was my 9th pro fight.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
it's really cool that you're approaching this as a professional, as you just described. You know what I mean? You're talking to your coaches, and you have a vision, you have a goal and an intent, and you want to get there. And you know, you're really putting yourself out there and saying you want to be challenged by the best to propel yourself even further, as opposed to just be content in your situation, which is a great situation, because the reality is you're a champion, right? How many people can say
we're
that?
in the culture. Sorry.
How many? You're a champion. You're the BFL champ. How many people can say they've been a champ? You know what I'm saying? Like,
That's good, yeah.
Some people would say, "This is it. I'm done. I'm happy here. I'll just see how long I can stretch this," which is great. I'm not knocking it, but it seems from what you've described that you have a vision. You want to take it to the next level, to quote you, as you said.
That's just it. Like, here's the thing, and we have a culture lately which glorifies like the immaculate records, right? Everybody wants to have a pretty record. That's just kind of the culture going on around here. And you'll notice there's guys, well, maybe you don't notice because it's not public, but like, there's a hell of a lot of ducking in our MMA culture around here. There's a hell of a lot of people that drop out of fights or don't want to fight good guys because it might be hard. But that kind of goes against the whole philosophy of even being a fucking MMA fighter, right? So there's guys dropping out of fights or don't want to fight a hard guy or don't want to do this because they want to protect their records. There's guys from around here too going fighting in lesser promotions and beating guys who they know they're going to beat. There's a bunch of guys here who have the same record as me or close records to me. But if you look at who they fought fucking bums. You know what I mean? It isn't the same thing. I fought like one guy with a negative record. If you look, here's the thing: like when you do that stat, where you combine the records of the opponents,
right,
and you look at the other guys with similar records to me from here around Canada, it doesn't even compare. You know what I mean? We did that.
Yeah.
We looked at the other guys who are also, these other up and comers, prospects. Their records are not the same as mine. They haven't fought people the same level as me. In some cases, I'm the only person to have ever beaten or have finished a bunch of my opponents as well.
Mm-hmm. No, these are important points, and I think from a communication perspective, I think this is stuff you almost need to highlight and inform the public about, because it's very relevant. As you mentioned, people tend to see the records and just assume, oh, this person lost X amount of times or won X amount of times. But that really doesn't provide us much information or context, right? It doesn't give the whole picture. So I
Who
think,
did you beat?
pardon me?
Who did you beat?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You don't just be 6-1 or whatever, but like, and then, man, if you look at it and you're like, oh shit, who did he beat? He beat this guy who's named this guy. If you look at it, I fought a bunch of champions. I fought two guys who just recently fought in the UFC. There's maybe one guy that I fought. No. Yeah, there's like two guys that I fought who, in fact, there might even be one who has a negative record out of all of them. You know what I mean? I haven't fought anybody with negative records.
Right. No, I think these are very key points that you need to almost integrate in your post-fight interviews and just get that sort of messaging out there, because I think there's different types of fans who just watch casually, and then there are fans who really dive into the stats and go deeper than that, as far as you mentioned, like to provide that context. Who did they fight? Who did they beat? You know what I mean? Because it's very relevant. I think promoters know that. But at the same time, as you mentioned, because you're someone out there fighting and competing, there is, as you described, the culture of people ducking that to protect their records, for whatever reason. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, if you want to fight the best, you got to chase the best, and that's what you're doing. Last question for you. Two-part question. When can we see, when's your next fight? If you have any insights into your next fight, and what advice do you have to give? Because, you're someone who's a champion now. And I'm not just speaking about, here in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. I'm talking about at a national level. You're representing BFL. You're in a leadership position, if it's fair to say, right? You're fighting, you're representing, you're putting in the work, right? What advice would you give to any sort of athlete looking to compete and to rise to your level? Well, what advice would you give them?
Well, to answer your first question, I don't have anything booked right now, so I don't know really what's next. If nothing comes up, I might compete in jiu-jitsu. But yeah, nothing's booked right now, but we're in talks. And then for advice, for somebody who wants to climb and for somebody who wants to succeed and get to that next level, I would go back to what I've already been talking about, which is be willing to challenge yourself. There's a lot of talk that when it comes to growth can only come from a stimulus. Growth can only come from a stimulus which shocks you, right? You need to be willing to step outside of the comfort if you want to grow. So constantly trying to pick and choose every opponent or whatever it may be, or maybe that concept crosses over for you in the training room. You know what I mean? You need to be willing to step out of your comfort zone a healthy amount, right? It's like Kujev talked about, I think with you, the zone of proximal development. Right? You have to give somebody just a bit more than they can chew, and then kind of guide them in the direction to how they can chew it. But they have to be just nudged out of that comfort zone. Doesn't mean you have to jump 2 feet off the edge and dive into the fire every time, because again, that could be foolish. That might be what a fool would do. But you have to be willing to a healthy amount creep outside of the comfort zone if you want to grow. And doing that consistently, I think, is what will start to accumulate into being a champion. You know what I mean? Being a champion, in my opinion, is something which comes from accumulated things. It's not just an ABC, you do this and then tomorrow you're a champ. No, it is an accumulation of steps over time.
Right.
Okay. In my case, 5 years, right? So I've been chipping away at this MMA thing for 5 years, and my consistency has been one of my secret weapons. My consistent improvement, but my consistent gradual exit from the comfort zone and doing all the right steps has put me on a trajectory where I've hit goals that I planned to do 5 years ago. Maybe I didn't do them in the exact time frame, but I got them done. You know what I mean? And I think if I can continue doing this and moving in the correct direction, I'm going to be wherever my brain was able to conceive all those years ago.
Incredible points, man. I really appreciate you sharing that advice and that insight. And you know, as a fan, of course, I look forward to seeing you compete in your next MMA match. Of course, all the best if it's jiu-jitsu. But you know, we'll be following along, and we look forward to seeing you in competing your next match. Thank you very much for your time, and have a good night.
Thank you for having me, brother.